Welcome to the Buy Box Bandits podcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Buy Box Bandits, episode 143. Today is a special guest and a special day for my man, too. We got David Jacobs with us. Hit $1 million in sales today. First sale, October 9th, 2022. 50/50 OA wholesale, and a pretty cool backstory as well. So thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Cool. So you obviously have a lot of stuff going on. We were talking off camera as well on prep center, different stuff like that. But overall, you kind of just want to dig into your backstory a little bit. What made you want to get into selling on Amazon? That kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I probably don't fit the typical Amazon seller background that a lot of these guys are hanging out with.
Yeah,
right?
Not at all.
I've been in the sort of like the professional business world about 25 years. I have an accounting and finance background, but I've been running organizations, teams, founded a company, sold a company, did VC funding, a whole bunch of things over my 25 years. And was just going through some kind of career changes over the last year. I was doing some consulting, and I stumbled upon a bunch of podcasts, including yours, Miles, and just sort of thought, well, if these 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds are making all this money,
that's
I know a lot more
the
than,
general
than
consensus. They see a bunch of talking heads on the internet, be like, bro, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, and I just kind of stumbled upon it, and it was sort of like just a fun experiment last fall because I'm not full-time Amazon. I still have some other things that I do outside of the Amazon e-commerce world, but I've become more and more drawn into it. It's just a lot of fun. I will say this: one of the things that I've done career-wise is I worked in digital advertising for many years. And what I did there was arbitrage. I would buy banner ads and then sell banner ads. So thinking about that industry, I probably bought and sold $500 million worth of banner ads in my career. So if you sort of think about that and kind of apply that in an Amazon context, there's so many interesting parallels.
This big number just dropped right there. But yeah. And then so like what just kind of in general, like what is appealing about this? Because like obviously, like you said, different background to what people typically get in this is like, okay, I don't like my job currently, or I'm in college and I don't want to do that stuff. Kind of for the like, what kind of drew you to this originally? And then can we talk about like the early days in terms of getting going and then ultimately doing what a lot of people want to do in their first year with relative ease part-time, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, what I really just liked about it is I've just always been drawn to the sort of inefficiencies of the arbitrage world and applying that in a lot of different places. So I never thought that this was going to be like a large part of what I do. I thought, well, hey, this is something you can go at whatever pace you want to. You can have a full-time job, you can have a part-time job, and you can just kind of apply all the concepts that I've already learned. And the other thing that I found is I've always been drawn to industries and areas where a lot of young people operate, because you have a lot of energy. So, I'm on Zoom calls I have a Zoom call at 3 p.m. today with 2 college kids, which is kind of funny. But like you sort of have these opportunities to sort of stay young and stay energized by just sort of staying connected. And those are some of the things that brought me to the sort of Amazon world for sure.
And so kind of tactically, what were some of the things, some of the maybe methods of sourcing that really clicked for you early on, right? Because you had a pretty steep trajectory in terms of that growth, which a lot of people that are listening to this are seeking, right? So what clicked for you? I mean, obviously you joined at a good time, right? Q4 last year, which ironically is about this time this year.
People listening. Yeah.
So what clicked for you?
Absolutely. Well, the very first thing I sold was there are these like crazy Halloween things for sale, like Home Depot and Walmart and stuff. And I sold a couple of those FBM, and I made like tons of profit. It was like 150% ROI. It was crazy. But pretty quickly, I just sort of went to the usual suspects. I got into the apparel category. But what I found was my general thought was, I used the concept of test buy, but I would kind of like 5X it in terms of what I would think of as test buy, because my gut was, I understand data. I learned how to read keep a charts really well. I learned how to sort of understand the inputs. And basically, if I could just apply that at scale, then I could just grow quicker.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a cool concept. One of the most appealing things with Amazon, right? Because, and we talk about it a bunch, there's really 2 bottlenecks, capital and knowledge, content, right? Yeah. And so once you solve that content piece, you have the advantage, right, being successful previously, that you can really throw grease on the fire and have this thing explode. Whereas the 20-year-old, the 18-year-old that's listening to this doesn't have that luxury. But to the viewer that is maybe coming from a similar position as you, what can you tell them in terms of the potential early on of how big this thing can really get?
Well, really, it's just about using data to inform decisions and being confident enough to go ahead and pull the trigger. And if you can do those things and get feedback quickly, I know there's this point of view that sometimes FBM is actually a quicker way to get feedback loop. I didn't do that aggressively myself, but if you can apply that pretty quickly, if you're not capital constrained, you can grow this business to a meaningful size. By meaningful, I'm like 30, 40, 50K a month, relatively fast. You're not taking crazy risks at that point. And like, honestly, the worst case scenario, if you're not making egregious buying errors, is that you're taking a small loss on something.
Or breaking
So some
even,
people
yeah,
like,
which is a
yeah,
loss. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But like some people like overanalyze things and they're maybe just waiting for the price to come back and everything. But my general view is just churning things relatively quickly, finding decent velocity products and just not overthinking it, because there's always another thing to buy. Like if you miss the one lost sale, there's gonna be another sale. If you miss the, there's hundreds of thousands of products for sale on Amazon. So you don't have to hit everything. That's the beauty of it.
And so talk us through how your business has adapted over the past 12 months, right? It probably looks a lot different now than it did in the beginning. Maybe that's in terms of products. Maybe that's in terms of OA wholesale.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had mentioned, I forget if it was off camera or on, that you have included some wholesale. So talk us through that kind of transition period that you've seen.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, like I was starting last year Q4, which was a perfect time to get started. So a lot of profitable products, a lot of profitable opportunities. I was doing heavy apparel and beauty, right out of the gate. That's kind of the easy products to learn. But then I did learn a little bit about the wholesale space. I just started DMing people on Twitter that I knew were smart people in the wholesale space. I offered to do calls, offered to take them out to dinner at ASD, flew out to Las Vegas, went to ASD, set up a bunch of accounts. That's the large wholesale show for those of you who are maybe listening for the first time in Las Vegas. I set up a bunch of wholesale accounts and just sort of walked the floor and got to know some of the folks and just really enjoyed it. I've done that in other parts of my career. And I've probably gotten to a point now where on the wholesale side, it's about 50% of my business. And then in parallel with that, I really try to focus on networking and talking to a lot of different sellers. So I'm in a number of Discord groups and, sharing war stories and sharing learnings. But I also brought on 2 part-time VAs. One is exclusively OA and one helps me a little bit with wholesale as well as OA. And that's been a good backstop, I would say. I don't rely on them completely, but they just help diversify, because honestly, like 1 or 2 good leads from the VAs every week can more than pay for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on the networking community side of things, so I obviously pretty much only have experience exclusively in like reselling and Amazon side of things. And that's like, pretty much the majority of the battle. Now you can look at someone, it's like, show me who the 5 Amazon stars you talk to the most, which for almost everyone is no one, right? And I'll show you what results you're gonna get. Does that exist in other areas too, or is that relatively exclusive to Amazon from someone because you have experience elsewhere too?
Well, it manifests itself a little bit differently, right? Because Amazon, you don't really get together naturally in person first. You get together naturally later, right? But in other industries, it's very like your reputation is your calling card, right? So you want to build those relationships, maintain those relationships, and sometimes you're doing that over years and even decades. And the fact is, this industry is so young. Like all of your relationships are probably a couple years old. But if you sort of zoom out and fast forward at 15, 20 years, think of the potential to build those relationships at scale. That's where I've come from over my career, and looking at relationships from a 15 or 20-year arc in some cases, not a 1 or 2 year arc.
So you've kind of had I have a question about your journey, right? Obviously you've founded and then came to Amazon, but we've kind of joked about a lot of the industry is young. And so for a lot of the viewers, it's going to probably be the opposite, starting with Amazon and then potentially venturing out, maybe founding companies, things like that. So having experienced both, what do you think are some of the parallels? And for the person that may do your trajectory in reverse, what do you think about Amazon will start to prepare them for some of the other ventures outside?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I mean, the one thing that I would say is, from a parallel standpoint, the nice thing about Amazon, it's like the lowest risk way to start and learn how to run a business possible.
That's such a good point. Yeah. Oh my God.
Like, it's sort of simple, right? You're not really hiring people at scale. You're not leasing space and, necessarily things like that. but it gives you such a great way to sort of transition from mowing lawns to sort of, running your own business at scale. And you can do that without a very big overhead. And I think anytime you're thinking about applications of that to other sort of other industries or other career journeys, I would think any person that's hiring somebody that's gone through that, that's a huge plus, right? So I know a lot of people, you see some people on Instagram and stuff, and they'll say, hey, quit your job, do Amazon full time, this, that, and the other. I'm actually a big proponent of getting the experience of working with companies and working with medium-sized businesses outside of Amazon in parallel, because one, Amazon's, you're putting all your eggs in one basket for sure, but two, there's no question that Amazon will make you better at everything else that you're doing. Plus, it can just add so much. I mean, why not take that job where you're making decent money and you're using that to fund your Amazon business and things like that? So it just gives you so much more optionality.
Yeah, and it's really important. We were talking about this legit yesterday with another awesome guest, and saying how you got to treat yourself as an entrepreneur, not an Amazon seller, like, because it's so hard.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If say someone's been an employee, right, 10, 20 years, right? The world's beaten a decent amount of it's tried to beat some of the juice out of them, right? They go in and scan some retail arbitrage, and so it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot imagine doing this for 20 years, right? At all. But then it's like, you shouldn't be, right? You move up in opportunity scale, right? You start out doing all right, and you do it, then your VAs do it, then you do wholesale, then your VAs help you out with wholesale and such, and it really evolves over time. And I think when you think about things in a longer sphere, it becomes a lot more feasible to put in some of that initial work. You know what I mean? And you see, like, just starting arbitrage, right? But then it's like private label stuff. Like, what kind of, like, how do you see this evolving the next couple of years? At least e-commerce, Amazon, private label, like wholesale. Like, where do you see yourself kind of hanging out?
Well, what's interesting is I've obviously had some success, and I think continue to scale what I'm doing right now in the OA wholesale space is 100% sort of something I'll continue to do. I would be shocked if I'm not selling on Walmart in 6 months. That seems to be an obvious place for other people to play. Where very few Amazon sellers are on Walmart right now, but the people who are seem to be doing really well because the competition is just so much lower. Yeah. And then the other piece of it, I've come from a consulting background and business background. I've always been a fan of the sort of the picks and shovels approach, where you support and provide the infrastructure for other companies to be successful. So earlier this year, opened up a prep center. So that's something that I launched in August in conjunction with two other partners. One of them is another Amazon seller. And I've always sort of thought about the notion of offering services and a continuum of services to Amazon sellers. So financial, accounting and bookkeeping services is another area that fits well in my background. So I can see sort of the opportunities in Amazon is it gives you the chance to pick and choose where you want to go at the time that you want to go there. So whether that's Walmart soon, whether that's opening up another business soon, et cetera, there's a lot of different paths you can take that. But for me, my goal would be to continue to scale the core and not go too far afield from that and distract myself until I know I can do a good job with the other things that I'm focused on.
Sure. And I'll tell you what, the bookkeeping piece is such a need in the community.
That is such a need, man. Yeah. Oh my God.
The Amazon community severely needs a face of bookkeeping, right? Yeah. That's like the go-to guy of, and like a face connected to that need, because there's so many young kids in Amazon that just have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and the problem is, like, when I started with Amazon, and if it's happened to me, it's definitely happened to everybody else. Yeah. You look at your numbers and you think you're super profitable, but then you really have to dig back and understand, like, did all my orders arrive? Did they check into Amazon properly? Like, all the nuts and bolts behind that takes time. And then the actual bookkeeping really is even after that all starts. So it takes a few months of sort of going through the reps to even sort of appreciate the details involved with that. So I can see myself, sort of exploring some of those paths. But like I said, I want to focus on the things that I know I can do a really good job of without overextending.
Yeah, because bookkeeping would be like a decent price point, and you could grow it so quick with an affiliate program too of other heads. So at a higher price point than like a software would be sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's such a need, because no one's talking about it. From that direction, what do you think is like some of the first steps to really start to get organized with all of your books, with all of your accounting, that sort of thing?
Well, I was actually talking to a seller yesterday who was sort of saying, well, I'm not as profitable as I'd like to be. He was a relatively new seller. And I was just kind of walking him through some of the reports on like Inventory Lab, right? So he could understand by ASIN what's profitable, what's not profitable. And a lot of it is just taking the time to dig into the details of how each of your individual, ASINs are selling, because there's like two pieces to this business, right? One is profitability and one's cash flow. They're very different dynamics. One is, are you actually making money with the stuff you have? And then two, how are you choosing to deploy that capital? Are you applying it back into the business? Are you churning your inventory fast? And you have to have a rational relationship with cash flow and profitability to understand all the metrics. Otherwise, you could draw some bad conclusions about how your business is performing
without even knowing. Yeah. So, all right. There's like college kids that are saying they don't have time. I'm pretty sure you have kids. You got other business stuff going on. You got Amazon
I got
stuff
2 teenagers.
There we go. So how does the time management break down? Because that's a bottleneck, actually a bottleneck, or could be a bottleneck. You have the reasons for it to be a bottleneck. Most people don't, at least the college kids, younger people watching. But how do you actually go about handling all that stuff, all the stuff you got going on?
Well, a lot of it comes down to delegation. So I've got some VAs now that are doing a lot of the blocking and tackling. A lot of it is if you build those relationships, a lot of these things don't take as long as they used to or they should. I personally spend probably very limited amount of time sourcing today. I can certainly do better at that, but I'm leveraging other people for that. So basically, any service that you can leverage, to me, it's prepping, number one, outsourcing that, probably 60% of my hours before I outsource that. And then two is the sourcing side of things. And you can outsource the sourcing through 2 ways. One is a VA, but also is just relationships, right? You have your different Discord groups that you're trading ideas and bringing value and things like that. I will tell you this: when before I opened my prep center, I worked with a prep center in Montana, and that was like life changing. Like January of 2022 or 23, when I stopped prepping product. One, my wife was like, I think she was going to divorce me because of all the stuff coming to my house.
Yeah, but you should be pissing off your family. All my young people list like it's garage, bedroom, and then an ongoing battle for the living room too, for at least for FBM season.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then, but just like the mental tax that prepping takes. And when that goes away, it is just such a lift. So those things in particular. And I also found, it also led me down the journey of opening a prep center myself, because I never would have thought about that as a need. But having experienced it and used a prep center and seeing what the needs were, to me, it just illuminated a business opportunity that I never would have found, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of prep centers, but there's very few very good ones.
Yeah.
There's very few quality ones.
Yeah.
There's gaping holes for the young man out there. That's what I mean. He desperately wants to get out of the small town. You get the warehouse lease in New Hampshire. You live in the warehouse. You Chad scale your own Amazon business with the no sales tax, and you're on the prep center. It's quite literally the best of both worlds, because you can make money that doesn't need money. Prep center service business. You can grow your own Amazon business, sales tax free, and then ideally you live in the warehouse to keep costs down. What more could a young man need?
Well, I'm not going to ask my general manager to live in the warehouse.
Well, that I agree with. Yeah.
But it's worked out great. We're in Delaware. It's super convenient, and it's actually surprising how few prep centers are in Montana. Or in New Hampshire and Delaware compared to like the West Coast. It was a little puzzling to me, so it seemed like a huge opportunity, for sure.
Yeah,
Once
well,
upon a time, Miles and I had a prep center in Delaware that didn't last very long.
Yeah, New Hampshire, and Garrett lived in the warehouse too, but New Hampshire has no income tax too, I'm pretty sure. That's like a crazy arbitrage, like the no sales tax.
That is incredible.
Live in the warehouse, grow your own.
I didn't know that. I didn't know the income
I'm pretty
tax
sure.
piece.
I might be tripping on that, but I think I'm right. With
Miles
that,
is gonna get a text. I moved to New Hampshire. There's the income tax.
Yeah, someone's gotta run that play. So in terms of like the networking connection side of things, how do you actually go ahead and do that though? Because everyone wants to do it and almost no one's actually successful with it, right? So what are kind of some of the, and I get it's partially right. You kind of just exist, but like tactical things, what are things you think a lot of people could be better at just from your experience talking to folks that are selling on Amazon and such?
What I just started to do is I'd see somebody on Twitter that was interesting. I would just DM them, and I would just tell them I like their content, ask if they'd mind hopping on a call. And it's shocking. And maybe it's because I've got a little gray hair and I've got enough Twitter followers and everything that they sort of say, hey, okay, this guy is not just some, lunatic, but the amount of relationships and honestly, the amount of Amazon revenue that I've generated just by making those connections has been phenomenal. So That's been the one piece. And I do that every day. Like literally yesterday, I DM somebody on Twitter. I ended up hopping on a call with them, and they're another 7-figure seller. So to me, you just have to force yourself. If it's not in your comfort zone, and for me, it's not a big deal, but if it's not your comfort zone, nobody knows who you are, right? You're just behind the curtain.
Yeah, no
So
one cares.
you
No
might as well
one's
just
thinking about you. No one
do
cares.
it.
Yeah, and it's free
Yeah,
too.
and that's the other thing. People like overestimate how much people care about you. Like they don't, if they don't want to respond, they won't respond, and that'll be it. But if
Yeah.
they do respond, then great. You didn't lose anything for it. It's free.
Yeah, and people are like online for the quite literally the sole purpose is to make money and meet people. Like there's no other reason to be on social media whatsoever. Like there's two functions that otherwise it makes no sense to be on it, right? And it's luckily, there's a lot of cool people, and just like this industry is very young. It's very lonely doing it by yourself, right? You guys listening to us right now everyone comes on here. We've had episode 143. I think we have like 117 guests or something like that. Every single one except Corey talks about how important the community was. Corey has since made that switch and involved himself a lot in the.
And would not go back. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So we're at 117 out of 117, and a lot of you guys listening still don't even give yourself a chance to meet anyone just based off circumstantially and such. You gotta work on that. Okay, mistakes you made last Q4, changes you're making this Q4, or just other mistakes you see a lot of people make this time of year. Because really see a lot of growth this year if you execute on things correctly.
Yeah, I think mistakes for me last Q4 was I just didn't know what I didn't know. I was a couple weeks in before Black Friday buying started, so I was just super early. And what I've just been doing now is just aggressively placing POs for wholesale. I've been going back to some things that I know are going to sell pretty well based on history last year. And I'm also tweaking my catalog a little bit because January returns can be pretty brutal for Amazon. So I've been tweaking my catalog. Like one of the things I've focused on the last several months has just been not just revenue but profitability. And I've actually traded off some lower revenue and maybe unprofitable ASINs to make sure that I'm being really smart with my capital. One of the things I expect will happen is by doing that, I'm going to have fewer returns in January compared to what I did last year, because those heavy shoes, heavy apparel, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think as a beginner, you kind of take what you can get, right? Because finding profitable stuff is the bottleneck. Then over time, you optimize to where you have the choice now, where you can choose those lower return types of products. And I think some people like it breaks my heart when people that are new are like, I'm like the shoe is 60% ROI, it's sitting right there, buy it. Like they're like, but I heard this super successful guy on Twitter say, don't do that. He has the choice. He has lots of opportunities. He's getting on Discord calls
that's
with
the
everyone.
piece that
So
a lot of people need to
there we
understand.
go. You take what you can get when you're new, because your ancestors worked very hard to get you to this point, and it would be crazy for you to say no to 40% ROI after returns.
Because so many people, so many of us, and both of us are probably guilty of talking about going deep on products. But when people stumble across one or two of a unit, even though it's making good money, they're like, I need to go deeper.
You got to fight.
But it's not always. Yeah.
Like I was in a call last night, and this guy asked me like, should I like how hard should I go with FBM? And my immediate question was, do you commute to a job you don't like? Right. And then he said he says yes, and then there's no limit. Like you gotta fight.
That is a bar. Talk us through kind of the first couple months of as your Amazon business continue to grow, the wife, the kids, the friends. So what were their kind of thoughts, comments?
What I would say is like, everybody just sort of was trying to understand what the hell this was. It was sort of like, wait, you're doing what? You're buying from where? And it's just really hard to explain it sometimes. So you're at like the Thanksgiving table last year and you're describing what you're doing. And, I'm pulling my app up and I'm like, holy cow, I did $4,000 on Black Friday. And I just started this thing and people were just baffled. But I think it just in general, it just is one of those things that I talk about with people. They think it's cool. They like it. Some of my friends who are in my same age range have actually started selling on Amazon, which is kind of funny. So they're a couple of them are like military guys. So they got the military discount and stuff like that. So those things are huge because they're like ex-military. So, but just in general, I think as I've kind of gotten past that initial hump, right? The first couple of months, you're just trying to figure out, is this really real? And like January, February is a little tricky because sales are kind of down in the dumps a little bit. But once you got past like March, I was like, okay, this is going to stick around. So it's been a good journey so far for sure.
Speaking
But you've
of
also
that,
established that street cred, whereas like if you start something new, it's people probably know it's
gotta prove it to
worthwhile.
them. Yeah,
You
like
know?
a lot of you guys listening, you're gonna go through that first Thanksgiving conversation. You're doing what? You left college to what? You quit your job to what? You got to get those blinders. Billy Flip said it best. You got to get those blinders on firm and not wean away from it. Basically right there. So another question I like to ask as well is just you've been obviously successful for a while. You've seen a lot of people start businesses do great, seen a lot of people start businesses do poorly, right? What are the traits you see in people that are able to have long-term success, whether it be Amazon in the short time you've been around or just overall?
It really comes down to relationships and analytics. If you're not good at one of them, or both of them, you should be really good at one of them. And if you can understand your numbers and you can build relationships, like that's really what business is all about, right? Because you need to be able to do the sales side, which is really what the relationships come down to. And then you need to understand what's behind it, or you need to hire people that can tell you what's behind it. So one of those two things you need to be really good at, and ideally you're at least decent at both of them for sure.
Kind of continuing on that path, something I talk about a bunch and passionate about is endurance training, endurance running, endurance sports, right? And I think there's a ton of parallel between starting and completing a marathon, the prep, the training, the eating right, the preparation, the race, to ultimately continuing to exhibit success inside business. And so you've talked about how you've completed 5 different marathons, right? And so kind of what parallels do you think between that entire process and business in general? Because I'm talking about if you want to advance your business life, do a marathon, right? Because you'll change yourself completely after it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a statement, I'm sure you guys have heard it. It's you overestimate what you can do in a day and underestimate what you can do in a year. And that's sort of like marathon training in a nutshell, right? You're training, you can't show up for a marathon a week after starting training. It's 3, 4, 6, 12 months really from the time you first lace up the shoes. So it's really about sort of just going through the reps, not getting too wrapped up in the highs or the lows. What I find is with social media and everything, so many people are watching things thinking there's going to be instant gratification and just sort of overreacting to the potential, but then also get like really bummed out if they don't hit it. But like something like this, what's great is you can run a marathon and not run a 3-hour marathon. You can just finish a marathon. Yeah. And like you can have a nice Amazon business. You don't have to do $1 million a year. You can do $250,000 a year. And that's still like a pretty cool business to have as a side project if that's what you're doing. So for me, what I just enjoy about whether it's training or something like this is, you set a goal and then you just kind of work towards it and you sort of bite the chunks of the goal off bit by bit.
Yeah.
What I think for me is the life-changing part, the disciplinary part is one training session, one run is not going to make or break the race, right? Same thing with 2 and 3. But the compounding effect of the showing up every single day is ultimately what's going to make the race and make you as a business owner. That's the piece.
Oh yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I haven't done the Ironmans like you have, but that's like my next.
I've done one. I've only done one.
Maybe that'll happen.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think like the big summations of this, right, is if you just like commit to the process with anything, especially with the Amazon side of things, and then get to know other people that are working on stuff as well. Like it's so cool. Like we were talking about this yesterday, Garrett, seeing a lot of these younger kids like videos on Twitter immediately. That guy's got it. He's got it. If you're willing to put your name on the line like that from day one, like people are going to help you like crazy, especially in the community side of Amazon things. So I think it's pretty important for everyone listening too. Cool. Okay. So thanks for coming on, David. Is there anywhere, so I know people could follow you on Twitter, and then you want to give us some Prep Center info too?
Yeah, for sure. So my Twitter is David Jacobs Live, so you can find me there. Our handle for the Prep Center is EC Prep and Ship on Instagram and EastCoastPrepandShip.com. Check us out. We're in Wilmington, Delaware. Easy to get to all the Amazon facilities from there. And I also have an Instagram that I use. It's actually only for my Amazon. It's _FBA_CPA.
Boom. There we go.
So that's I'm gonna light that up when I get down the services route for financial stuff. But I'm still posting some stuff there as well.
I was gonna say that was a bold statement, putting your Prep Center info out there because people need it. So
yeah, hey,
hopefully you have the capacity.
Business, man. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we will certainly talk to them, and when we onboard them, it will just be a function of when our, what our capacity is. But
Yeah.
but we're happy to talk to folks. And what I always say is, some prep centers have these hard and fast rules about volume and everything, but I like to help people grow and grow with our customers. So once you get a customer in a prep center, it's very sticky, and if you do a good job with them, when they're successful, we'll be successful.
Cool.
That's it.
Sweet. That's what's up. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks a lot for coming on. I thought that was an awesome, super valuable chat today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Cool. Thanks everyone for listening.